At midnight, the most feared man in the city pointed at a woman nobody ever looked at and said, "She's coming with me." The room went silent. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Dominic Varelli had just chosen his maid, a quiet girl in a gray uniform, to stand beside him at his brother's wedding. What nobody in that room knew was that Lena Hart had spent 7 years running from a dead man's shadow, and tonight, by stepping into the light on Dominic's arm, she was about to paint a target on both their backs. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The Varelli estate sat on 18 acres of hill country outside the city, a house built from old stone and older money. From the road, you couldn't see it at all, just a black iron gate that opened for nobody without a name, a long drive that climbed between rows of cypress trees, and at the top of that climb, a house that looked like somebody had tried to copy a European cathedral and gotten bored halfway through. Inside, it was quieter than any house that big had a right to be. That was the first thing Lena Hart had noticed 7 months ago, when she'd walked in through the service entrance with a duffel bag and a fake last name. Quiet. Not peaceful. She knew the difference. This was the kind of quiet that happened when everyone in a house was afraid of the same man. She'd been afraid of worse in her time. She took the job. At 11:47 on a Friday night in October, Lena was on her knees in the West Corridor, scrubbing a wine stain out of a rug that was probably worth more than her mother's entire life. The stain was fresh. Somebody at dinner had laughed too hard, or argued too loud, and a glass of red had gone over. Mrs. Castellano, the head of house, had pointed at Lena without looking at her and said, "Before morning, I don't want to see it." That had been 2 hours ago. The stain was mostly gone now. Lena's knees ached. Her back ached. Her hair had come loose from the knot she'd twisted it into, and she kept shoving it behind her ear with the back of her wrist because her hands were wet. She didn't hear him walk up. Dominic Varelli didn't make noise when he moved, which was a thing people said about him in the same tone they used when they talked about the weather before a storm. "You missed a spot." Lena went still, just for a second. Then she looked up. He was standing maybe 6 feet away, one hand in the pocket of his trousers, the other holding a glass of something amber. He was still in his dinner suit, though the tie was gone and the top button of his shirt was open. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired you got from a long day, the kind that settled in the bones and didn't leave. "Where, sir?" she said. "I'm kidding." He took a drink. "It's fine, leave it." Mrs. Castellano said. "I don't care what Mrs. Castellano said. Go to bed." She didn't move. That was her first mistake, if you could call it a mistake. People who worked for Dominic Varelli did not stare at him. They did not meet his eyes. They said yes, sir, and no, sir, and they moved fast and low like deer in a field where they knew there were hunters. Lena stared at him. She was too tired to remember the rules. He looked back at her. It was a strange, long look, not the kind she was used to from men. Not hungry, not dismissive, something else, like he was trying to place where he'd seen her before, except she knew he'd seen her every day for 7 months and never really looked. "What's your name again?" "Lena, sir." "Lena what?" "Hart." "Hart." He repeated it like he was tasting it. "How long have you worked here, Lena Hart?" 7 months. 7 months. He nodded slowly, still watching her. "And in 7 months, how many times have I spoken to you?" She hesitated. "This is the first, sir." "Thought so." He took another drink, then, without any warning at all, he said, "My brother's getting married tomorrow night, you know that?" "Yes, sir. The house has been—" She gestured vaguely. "Everyone's been preparing." "Right. Everyone's been preparing. 500 guests, senators, 2 of them, a federal judge, half the old families on the East Coast. My mother's been planning it for 11 months, and she hates the bride." He said all of this like he was reading off a grocery list. "I was supposed to bring someone. A woman. Elena Moretti. You know who that is?" "No, sir." "Good. Neither do I, really. Her father runs shipping out of Baltimore. My mother picked her. I said yes to keep the peace. Now I'm saying no." Lena didn't know why he was telling her any of this. She kept her hands flat on the rug, the wet cloth forgotten between them, and tried to look like she wasn't there. "I need a date for tomorrow," Dominic said. "I decided about 10 minutes ago, sitting at my desk, staring at a wall. I'm not bringing Elena Moretti. I'm not bringing anyone my mother picked, and I'm not bringing anyone who wants something from me, which narrows the field to basically no one. He took a step closer. Just one. Lena felt it in her chest. I want you to come. For a second, she genuinely thought she'd misheard him. She actually looked at the wet rag in her hand, at her uniform, at her bare knees on the wood floor, and then back at him, because none of this matched. Sir, she said carefully, I don't think I know what it sounds like. It's not that. I'm the maid. I'm aware. I can't. She could feel her face going hot, the panic starting to climb up from her stomach. Sir, there are a lot of people here who would be better suited. That's the problem, he said. All of them would be better suited. Every single one of them would know exactly how to behave, who to charm, who to insult, when to smile, and every single one of them would be working an angle on me before the soup course. I'm tired of being worked, Lena. I'm tired of rooms full of people who look at me like I'm a door they're trying to get through. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. You look at me like I'm a person, he said. You don't want anything from me? I noticed that. 7 months and you've never once lifted your eyes when I walked past. You don't flirt. You don't whisper. You don't angle. I don't know anything about you, and I think that's the most honest thing in this house right now. You don't know anything about me. Her whole body locked up around those words. You have no idea. I'll pay you, he said, misreading her silence. Whatever you want. It's a job. One night. You come with me, you stand next to me, you eat the food. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. I'll handle it. And tomorrow night you come home and go back to your life, and we never do this again. Sir, Dominic. She blinked. What? If you say yes, my name is Dominic, for tomorrow at least. Sir makes it sound like an arrangement. It is an arrangement. A flicker of something crossed his face, almost a smile. Fair. She stared at the rug. Her hands were shaking now, and she hoped he couldn't see it in the low light. Every part of her that had survived the last 7 years was screaming at her, loud and clear. No, no, absolutely not. You don't walk into a room with 500 people and cameras and senators and old East Coast names. You disappear. That's what you do. That's the only thing you do. But the other part of her, the part that was so tired of being invisible and small and afraid of every shadow, that part of her looked up at him and thought, he saw me. He actually saw me. Why me? She said. Her voice came out rougher than she meant. Dominic considered the question seriously. She'd give him that. Because you're the only person in this house who hasn't lied to me yet, he said. I know it's only 7 months. Give it time. Maybe you'll start. But right now, tonight, I need one person beside me who isn't lying. That's you. She almost laughed. It would have been the wrong kind of laugh, the kind that cracked in the middle, because she was lying. Her whole life here was a lie. Her name was a lie. The social security number she'd used to get hired was a lie. The dead girl whose identity she'd borrowed, God rest her, had been a lie the moment Lena started wearing her like a coat. But she didn't laugh. She swallowed it down, the way she swallowed everything down, and she said, okay. Dominic's eyebrows went up, just slightly, like he hadn't actually expected her to agree. Okay? Yes, sir. Yes, Dominic. He looked at her for another long second. Then he nodded once and finished his drink. Good, he said. Mrs. Castellano will hate it. Let me worry about that. Someone will come for you in the morning. Hair, dress, all of it. Don't thank me. This isn't a kindness. He turned to go. Then he stopped, half turned back, and added, What's your real name, Lena Hart? Her blood stopped moving. Sir? Never mind. He waved a hand. Get some sleep. He walked away down the corridor. His footsteps made no sound on the polished wood. Lena sat on her knees on a rug that wasn't quite clean, in a house that wasn't hers, and realized her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't hold the cloth anymore. The staff quarters sat behind the main house, down a sloped path through a garden that had been carved back for the winter. Lena's room was on the 2nd floor, at the end of a hallway of identical white doors. It had a single bed, a dresser, a small window that looked out onto a wall of pine trees, and a lock she'd installed herself the first week with money she'd saved without asking permission. She locked the door behind her now, threw the deadbolt, checked the window, closed, latched. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. 7 years. 7 years of being no one, of sleeping in rented rooms and moving every time a stranger looked at her too long, of learning to dye her hair in gas station bathrooms, and learning which bus lines didn't take IDs, and learning to walk into a restaurant and eat a meal without ever looking directly at another human face. She had a name that wasn't hers, and a past that she'd carved off like rotten fruit, and a life here, where nobody asked questions because Dominic Varelli's house wasn't the kind of place that attracted inspectors. That was the point. That was why she'd taken the job. A house where the walls were thick and the gates were real, and nobody would look for Kate Donnelly among the maids of a crime family they were too afraid to subpoena. And now Dominic Varelli had looked at her and chosen her. And tomorrow he was going to walk her into a room with 500 people and cameras she hadn't even thought about yet. And she pressed her hands over her mouth. Cameras. Her face. Her face in a newspaper. Her face on someone's phone. Her face on the social pages of some glossy magazine nobody important read, but that lived forever on the internet, searchable, findable by him. Victor Hale had been looking for her for 7 years. Patient, rich, connected. The kind of man who would pay a man in a diner to watch a woman's hands while she ate, just in case. She had run from city to city to city because that's what you did when a man like that wanted you dead. You ran, and you got small, and you stayed small. Tomorrow night she was not going to be small. She got up. She paced. She sat down. She got up again. At one point she actually put her duffel bag on the bed and started to pack it. Her hands moved on instinct, the way they'd moved a dozen times before, in a dozen cheap rooms. Fold the shirt, roll the socks, pack the envelope of cash at the bottom, leave the rest. She got as far as zipping it closed. Then she stopped. She thought of Dominic standing in the corridor with his tired eyes and his half-empty glass, saying, "You look at me like I'm a person." She thought about how he'd said it, not with any softness, just honest, like he was reporting the weather. And she thought of how strange it was, that in a house this full of people, he'd been lonely enough to notice a maid. She thought about what it was like to be seen for 1 minute by somebody who wasn't trying to hurt you. She unzipped the bag. She sat back down on the bed. She cried quietly into the back of her wrist for about 2 minutes. Then she wiped her face, set an alarm on the cheap phone she kept only for work, and lay down fully dressed with the light on. She did not sleep. Not really. She drifted. Every noise in the house woke her. At 3:14 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the corridor below and sat bolt upright with her heart punching her ribs, and it turned out to be just the night cook going to get a glass of water. By the time the sun came up, Lena Hart was 28 years old, terrified, and already half in love with the worst decision of her life. Mrs. Castellano arrived at the staff quarters at 7:30 in the morning and did not knock. Lena heard the key in the lock. Of course, Mrs. Castellano had a key. Lena had been a fool to think otherwise, and sat up on the bed, her feet hitting the floor, her heart already in her throat. Mrs. Castellano was a small, thin woman of about 60, with iron gray hair pinned back so tight it pulled at her temples. She had run the Varelli household for 31 years. She had buried 2 husbands, and it was rumored, by the gardener who told Lena this on her second day, that she had helped at least one of them into the ground. She stood in the doorway and looked at Lena like Lena was a stain on a rug. "So," she said, "it's true." Lena didn't answer. She wasn't sure what the right answer would be. Mrs. Castellano walked into the room without being invited. She picked up the duffel bag from where Lena had left it at the foot of the bed, felt the weight of it, and set it down again. She did this without expression. "Packed already," she said. "Smart girl, don't unpack." "Ma'am?" "I said don't unpack." Mrs. Castellano turned to face her. "You listen to me, Miss Hart. I don't know what you did to put this idea into his head. I don't want to know. I've worked in this house for a very long time, and I have seen many foolish women do many foolish things because a Varelli man looked in their direction. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "No, you don't? Let me be clearer." Mrs. Castellano took a step closer. Her voice was flat. "Dominic Varelli does not take maids to weddings." Dominic Varelli does not take anyone to weddings. He has refused to attend 3, which is a record in this family. The fact that he is attending this one at all is already a surprise. The fact that he has selected you, a 7-month hire with no references I can confirm, and a background check that I have frankly always found interesting in its blandness. That fact is not a surprise. That fact is a disaster. Lena kept her face still. So let me tell you what is going to happen today, Mrs. Castellano went on. A team of women will arrive at 11 o'clock to dress you. They will treat you like you are someone. You will say thank you, and you will keep your eyes down, and you will let them do their job. At 6 o'clock, you will go to the main house. At 6:30, you will get into a car with Mr. Varelli. At approximately 7:15, you will arrive at St. Cecilia's. You will smile when he smiles. You will answer no questions. You will drink nothing but water. You will not speak to the press under any circumstances. And at some point before midnight, you will come home. You will give me back the dress. You will go to your bed. And on Monday morning, you will go back to cleaning my house. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. And if you do anything to embarrass him or this family, I will personally drive you to the bus station, and I will put you on a bus, and you will not come back. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Castellano studied her for a long moment. Her eyes were pale and hard, like river stones. Good, she said finally. You know, Miss Hart, I almost like you. You're quiet. You work clean. I've had 30 maids in this house, and most of them talk too much. You don't. I respect that. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. Mrs. Castellano turned to leave. At the door, without looking back, she said, Whatever you're running from, girl, and I know you're running from something, I hope you've got the sense to keep running once this is over. She closed the door behind her. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands flat against her knees until they stopped trembling. The women arrived at 11, exactly as promised. There were 4 of them. One did hair, one did makeup, one did nails, and one, a tiny, sharp-eyed woman named Fallon, was apparently in charge of the dress. They filled Lena's room like a small, efficient army. They did not introduce themselves. They did not ask her any personal questions. They asked only the questions their jobs required. Have you eaten? Are you allergic to anything? When did you last color your hair? Show me your feet. Lena did what Mrs. Castellano had told her. She said thank you. She kept her eyes down. She let them do their job. It took almost 6 hours. They washed her hair and dried it and pinned it up in sections and then down in others, a slow sculpted shape that she couldn't see properly in any mirror they gave her. They put a cream on her face that smelled like nothing, then another that smelled faintly of roses. They painted her nails a dark, glossy red. They gave her a robe and took away her uniform and did not tell her where they were putting it. At 4 o'clock, Fallon brought out the dress. It was in a long garment bag, and when she unzipped it, Lena actually stepped back a little. The color was the first thing she saw. A deep, living red. Not scarlet, not wine. Something between. The second thing she saw was how much of it there was, and how little at the same time. Long. Floor length. Fitted at the waist. A sweep of bare shoulder. A slit up one side that Fallon was already eyeing with professional satisfaction. Oh, Lena said, just that. Fallon glanced at her. Problem? No, Lena swallowed. I don't own anything red. Fallon snorted. You don't own anything. Not today. Arms up. The dress slid over her head and down her body like water finding its level. It fit. Of course it fit. Someone had clearly taken her measurements from something, probably her uniform. Fallon zipped her in and stepped back and looked at her the way a carpenter looks at a chair he's just finished. Huh, Fallon said. What? Nothing. Fallon shook her head. Shoes. The shoes were red too, a shade darker than the dress, with a low but uncompromising heel. Lena had not worn heels in 7 years. She wobbled once, caught herself on the dresser, and Fallon's mouth twitched in something that might have been a smile, if she'd let it. Walk, Fallon said. Down to the window and back. Go. Lena walked. The first pass was bad. The second was worse. On the third, something in her hips remembered what her head had forgotten. A different life, a different girl, who'd worn heels to nice dinners and danced on wooden floors and laughed. She walked the length of the small room and back, and Fallon nodded, satisfied. "You'll do," Fallon said. "Now sit down. We're not done." They weren't done. There were earrings, 2 thin red drops, a bracelet, something with diamonds, or things that looked like diamonds. She didn't ask. A small clutch she would not be allowed to put anything of her own into. A last coat of something on her lips that tasted faintly of wax. And then, at 5:40, Fallon stepped back and folded her arms and said, "Look." She turned Lena toward the full-length mirror on the back of the door. Lena didn't recognize the woman in the glass. It wasn't that she looked beautiful, although she did. It was that she looked certain. The woman in the mirror had a straight spine and a steady mouth, and eyes that actually met the mirror's eyes. Her hair was caught up off her neck in something soft and complicated. The red of the dress made her skin look almost lit. She looked like someone a man might notice across a crowded room. She looked, if you didn't look too close, like someone who had never been afraid of anything. Lena stared at her. "Breathe," Fallon said, quietly. "In through the nose." Lena breathed. "You got anyone you're nervous about seeing tonight?" The question was casual, professional. The kind of thing Fallon probably asked every client. But it cracked something open in Lena's chest for half a second, and before she could stop it, her eyes filled. She blinked it back, hard. Fallon was already turning away, pretending not to have seen. "Nobody," Lena said. "Just nerves." "Sure," Fallon said. "Everybody's nobody until there's somebody. Let's go. Car's coming." At 6 on the dot, Mrs. Castellano walked her across the garden path to the main house. Mrs. Castellano did not speak. Neither did Lena. The sun had gone down and the grounds were lit with small lamps set into the stone. Somewhere, a fountain was running. Lena's heels made a sharp, unfamiliar sound on the path, and she thought, "That's the sound of me not being invisible anymore." They came in through a side door and up a back staircase, and Mrs. Castellano stopped her at the landing. "Down this hall," she said. "The library. He's waiting." "Thank you." "Miss Hart." Mrs. Castellano's voice was very quiet. "If you're going to run, run now. There's a car out front for the caterers. Tell the driver I sent you. He won't ask questions. You can be 3 counties away by morning." Lena looked at her. Mrs. Castellano looked back. There was nothing warm in her face. But there was something, some recognition, woman to woman, one survivor looking at another. Lena thought about it. She actually thought about it. She thought about the car and the driver and 3 counties away, and another cheap room, and another fake name, and another quiet life of being nobody to nobody. Then she thought of Dominic in the corridor. "You look at me like I'm a person." "Thank you, Mrs. Castellano," she said. "I'm going to the library." Mrs. Castellano's mouth tightened. She nodded once. "Then God help you both." She turned and walked back down the stairs. Lena walked down the hall alone. The library was a long room at the east end of the house, 2 stories tall, with books from floor to ceiling and a fire going in a stone fireplace because it was October and the nights were cold. Dominic was standing in front of the fire in a black tuxedo, looking at something on his phone. He looked up when she came in. He looked up, and then he stopped. For maybe 3 full seconds, Dominic Varelli, the most feared man in 4 states, the man who had stood in federal courtrooms and smiled at prosecutors until they forgot their own questions, just stared at her. Then he put his phone in his pocket. "Well," he said. His voice had gone a little rough. "All right, will I do?" The words came out before she could stop them. They came out almost teasing, a little dry, and she didn't know where that voice had come from. Maybe from the woman in the mirror, maybe from the girl she used to be, 7 years and a lifetime ago. Dominic almost smiled. "Yeah," he said. "You'll do." He crossed the room to her. He walked differently toward her than he had in the corridor last night. Slower, more deliberate. When he stopped, there was about a foot between them. Up close, she could smell whatever he'd put on. Something quiet, like cedar after rain. "Listen to me," he said, low. "Before we get in the car." "Okay. Tonight there are going to be people in that room who will try to figure out who you are. Some of them will be polite about it. Some of them won't. If anyone asks and you don't know what to say, You look at me. I'll say it. Don't try to make something up. You're a terrible liar. I could tell last night. If only you knew, she thought. Okay, she said. My brother is a good kid. The bride is nervous. My mother is going to try to cut you into small pieces with her eyes. Don't look at her. Look at me. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you. And if at any point tonight you need to leave, for any reason, I don't care what, you say the word tired, just that word. You say it, and we're gone. I don't explain. We just go. Can you remember that? Tired, she repeated. Yes. Good. He looked down at her for a second longer. You look... He stopped himself, shook his head. Let's go. He offered her his arm. She took it. Under the fine wool of his jacket, his arm was warm and steady, and she realized, with a small shock, that her own arm was shaking and that his wasn't, and that he could feel hers shaking and had chosen not to say anything about it. They walked out of the library together, down the long staircase, through the front hall, out under the enormous chandelier and onto the front drive, where a black car was waiting with its back door already open. A dozen of the staff were watching from the edges of the hall. People Lena had worked beside for 7 months. People who'd never learned her name. People who were now looking at her the way you looked at a stranger. She felt their eyes on her back all the way to the car. Dominic handed her in. He got in after her. The door closed. The driver, a big man named Anton, whose face Lena had seen 1,000 times in this house and never once really looked at, pulled them smoothly down the drive. Inside the car, it was very quiet. Lena looked down at her hands in her lap. The bracelet Fallon had put on her wrist caught the light from passing street lamps. Her nails were the same red as the dress. You can still go back, something in her said. You're still Lena Hart. Nobody's seen you yet. Nobody real. Dominic, beside her, was looking out his own window. He seemed to be thinking about something a long way away. Then, without turning his head, he said, Whatever you're afraid of, Lena Hart, it isn't me. I want you to know that, for tonight, just for tonight. She didn't answer. She couldn't, because she wanted to believe him so badly, it felt like something breaking in her chest. The gates of the Varelli estate opened. The car turned onto the road. Ahead of them, the lights of the city bled up into the sky, and somewhere in that city, in a pew at St. Cecilia's, 500 people were taking their seats for a wedding none of them would ever forget. Lena Hart rode toward them in a red dress, on the arm of a man the world was afraid of, and for the first time in 7 years she did not feel invisible. She felt seen, and she was about to learn what that cost. The city came at them in pieces. First the long dark stretch of the estate road, where the headlights picked out nothing but cypress trunks and the pale stripe of the asphalt. Then the turn onto the county highway, where the world widened and you could see the lights of the valley laid out like something spilled. Then the interchange and the rise of the overpass, and all at once the downtown skyline was right there in the windshield, close enough that Lena could count the lit floors of the tallest tower. She counted them. 42. She didn't know why. Her mind was doing small, pointless things to keep itself from doing the big thing. Dominic hadn't said another word since the gates. He was on his phone again, thumb moving slowly, reading something. He read the way he did most things, without hurry, without showing anything on his face. Once, he laughed, a short, quiet sound that wasn't really a laugh. Something funny? She said, because the silence was worse than anything she could ask. My mother. Is she texting you? She's been texting me for an hour. He glanced at her sideways. You want to know what she's saying? Not really. Smart. He put the phone face down on his thigh. Good instinct. Keep using it tonight. Anton took them off the interchange and onto Prescott, the long straight shot that ran the length of the old money district, past the club and the museum and the row of brick townhouses where people with 3 last names lived. The streetlights here were the old kind, iron and globe, and they threw warm, round pools of light onto the pavement. It was pretty. Lena had walked this street once in a hooded sweatshirt with a grocery bag and kept her head down the whole way. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Why are you really doing this? He didn't answer right away. He turned his head and looked at her, and in the low light of the car, his eyes looked almost black. I told you last night. You told me I don't want anything from you. That's not a reason to take me to a wedding. That's a reason to leave me alone. Huh. He thought about it. You're sharper than you let on, Lena Hart. I'm not trying to be sharp. I'm trying to understand. He looked back out his window. They were passing the museum now, long steps lit up in the dark, a banner across the facade advertising some exhibit she'd never get to see. My brother's name is Matteo, Dominic said. He's 26. He's the only person in my family I actually like. When we were kids, he used to follow me around the house with a notebook, writing down everything I said, like I was going to stop existing if he didn't get it all down. Then he grew up and realized what I am, and he pulled back, which was the right thing to do. I want to be clear about that. Okay, the woman he's marrying tonight, her name's Claire. She's a nurse. She's from Ohio. Her father's dead. Her mother runs a diner outside Columbus, and she has no idea what she's marrying into. He paused. Actually, that's not fair. She has some idea. She's not stupid. She's hoping, I think, that if she loves him hard enough, he'll become somebody else. Somebody not named Varelli. Is he going to? No, Dominic said it flatly. He's going to try. She's going to help him try. And in about 3 years it'll break them, and she'll go back to Ohio, and he'll do whatever the rest of us did. That's what's going to happen, Lena. I can see it from here. I can see it clear as that building. He pointed at the tower. 42 floors. So tonight, he said, I'm going to walk my brother down the aisle of a church I don't believe in, and I'm going to stand next to him, and I'm going to watch him marry a woman who's too good for this, and I'm going to smile for the photographers. And the entire time I'm going to be thinking about how I couldn't stop any of it, because what he wants is to be normal, and I can't give him normal, because I am the reason he isn't. She watched his profile. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the tower like it had done something to him. That's a lot to carry into one night, she said quietly. Yeah, it is. So why do you want me there? Because if I walk in with Elena Moretti or any of the other women my mother has lined up on a spreadsheet somewhere, then tonight is just more of this. He gestured, a small tired motion, at the window, at the city, at his own life. More of the game. And I can't do more of the game tonight. I can't, Lena. I'll come apart. He said it evenly. That was what got her. He said it the way another man might say, I think it's going to rain. So I walk in with you, he said, and nobody knows what to make of it. And they all spend the night trying to figure you out instead of trying to work me. And for maybe 4 hours I get to stand in a room and not be handled. That's what I'm doing. That's why you. The car slowed for a light. In the quiet, she could hear the ticking of the indicator, soft and patient, like a clock. I'm not a shield, Dominic. He turned his head. He looked at her, really looked, and she could feel her stomach drop. No, he said, you're not. And I'm sorry if it sounds like that's what I'm asking. It's not. I wanted someone honest next to me tonight. I didn't think past that. She didn't say anything. The light turned green. Anton eased them through the intersection. A block later, Dominic said, very quietly, if you want to go back, I'll turn the car around. Right now. No hard feelings. Lena looked at her hands. Her nails were still that impossible red. The bracelet still caught the light. Under all of it, her heart was beating against her ribs the way it had beaten 7 years ago in a parking lot behind a warehouse, when she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see and known, in that same moment that her life was over. She had survived that night. She had survived 7 years of nights. Keep driving, she said. Dominic nodded once and said nothing else. 2 blocks from St. Cecilia's, the traffic started to thicken. News vans, town cars, a line of black SUVs, engines idling, waiting their turn at the front of the church. Lena saw the cameras before she saw the people, long lenses on tripods, a red carpet, actual red carpet, laid out from the curb up to the arched wooden doors. A crowd behind a velvet rope, civilians straining to see who was getting out of each car. Jesus, she breathed before she could stop it. Yeah, my mother invited 3 magazines. She said it was for Matteo. It's not for Matteo. You walk. His voice was calm now, all the tiredness gone, replaced by something focused, something she hadn't heard in him before. You keep your chin up. You don't look at the cameras. You don't smile at them, and you don't frown at them. You look at me, or you look at the door, or you look at nothing. They'll shout. Don't answer. Anton opens your door. I come around and take your hand. We walk. 15 feet. That's it, 15 feet to the door. You can do 15 feet. 15 feet, she echoed. That's right. What if they ask who I am? They'll ask, they'll shout names at you. None of those names are yours. Let it go past you like wind. She took a breath, held it, let it out. Dominic. Yeah. They're going to take pictures of my face. Yeah. A lot of pictures. He looked at her. Something in his expression sharpened, just slightly, like a man who'd been told one fact and had just realized there was a second one hiding underneath it. Is that a problem? The car was slowing. Anton's eyes flicked to them in the rear view. She had a second. Maybe two. And in that second, she saw herself again in a different car, 7 years ago, a cheap blue Corolla, her own car, parked behind a warehouse because she'd taken a wrong turn on the way home from her second shift waiting tables. And she'd seen the two men in the loading bay, and she'd seen the third man on the ground between them, and she'd seen the fourth man step out of the shadow and put a bullet in the man on the ground. And that fourth man had been Victor Hale. And Victor Hale had looked up, just at the wrong moment, and his eyes had met hers through her windshield, and she had thrown her car in reverse and driven for 11 hours without stopping. Her name had been Kate Donnelly then. No, she said. No problem. Dominic kept looking at her a half-second longer than he needed to. Then he nodded, like he'd filed it somewhere to come back to later, and the car stopped. Anton got out and opened her door. The noise hit her like a wave, not a roar, a chattering, rising, excited noise. 100 people asking questions at once, and under that, the click, click, click of shutters like a rainstorm on a tin roof. She stepped out onto the red carpet, and the heel of her right shoe caught briefly on the lip of it, and for one bright 6 seconds she thought she was going to fall, in front of all of them, in front of everyone. But then Dominic was there, his hand sliding under her elbow, quiet and steady, and her feet found the ground again. Easy, he murmured, too low for the cameras. Look at the door, not at them. She looked at the door, arched, wooden, very old. She walked toward it on his arm, and the cameras kept firing, and someone, a man with an earpiece, was shouting, "Mr. Varelli, sir, Mr. Varelli, who's the lady, sir? What's her name, ma'am, ma'am? Look this way, just one look, ma'am." And she did not look. She walked. 15 feet, she counted. 12, 10, 8. A woman behind the velvet rope shrieked, "Is that his new girlfriend?" And somebody else shouted back, "That's Elena Moretti, you idiot." And a third voice said, "That's not Moretti. Moretti's a blonde." 6 feet, 4. At the doors, an old man in a black suit, security, she realized, though he looked like a retired priest, nodded at Dominic and pulled the heavy door open. Dominic put his hand on the small of her back and eased her through. The door closed behind them. The noise cut off like a switch had been thrown. Inside, the church was enormous and full of candles. It was the kind of interior that made people stop talking without meaning to. Stone arches climbing into dark. Stained glass going black at the edges because the sun was long gone. 2 rows of massive pillars holding up a ceiling you couldn't see. And everywhere, candles, hundreds of them, in iron stands along the walls, in clusters at the ends of the pews, at the altar in the far distance. The air smelled like beeswax and old wood and the specific cool damp of a very old stone building. The pews were full, 500 people, give or take, and Lena could feel every single head turning. She froze, just for a breath, just long enough that Dominic, without looking at her, squeezed her elbow once, very lightly. "Walk," he said, under his breath, slowly, like we own the floor. They walked. The aisle went on forever. She made herself look straight ahead, at the altar, at the candles, at anything that wasn't a face. But her peripheral vision caught everything. She caught the men in dinner suits whose eyes tracked her. She caught the women in pearls and silk whose eyes did the same thing, a colder version of it. She caught a heavy-set man near the back who turned completely around in his pew to stare, and a woman beside him who hissed at him in Italian and yanked his shoulder back. Halfway down, she spotted Mrs. Varelli. Dominic's mother was sitting in the second pew from the front on the aisle in a dress the color of dark wine. She was a small woman with a very straight spine and silver hair cut close to her head, and she wore a single string of black pearls at her throat. When Lena's eyes accidentally met hers, Mrs. Varelli did not look away. She did not blink. She looked at Lena the way a jeweler looks at a stone he already knows is fake. Then she turned her head slowly and looked at her son. Dominic did not acknowledge her. He walked Lena past his mother's pew, past 3 more rows of cousins and uncles and men whose last names were whispered in this city the way you whispered curse words, and brought her to a reserved pew near the front. There was a place card on the seat. Dominic picked it up, glanced at the name on it. Lena couldn't read it from where she stood, and crumpled it in his fist without expression. "Sit," he said, gently. She sat. He sat beside her. He did not let go of her hand. The organ began to play. A low, slow note, then a chord. People turned in their seats toward the back. The doors opened again. Matteo Varelli came down the aisle with his mother. She'd let go of her pew to do this, and Lena watched her walk past, head high, not looking at anyone. And he was young, younger even than Dominic had made him sound, with dark curls and nervous hands. When he saw Dominic, he almost broke stride. He recovered and gave his brother a single fast, grateful look, and went on to the altar. Then the music changed and Claire came in. Lena did not look at her at first. She was watching Dominic watch his brother. She was watching his face do something very small and very private, a tightening of the jaw, a softening at the eyes, the face of a man who was saying goodbye to something without being allowed to say so out loud. She thought, he really does love him. And then she thought, I don't know anything about this man. I don't know anything about him at all, and I am holding his hand in front of 500 people. Then she looked up, and Claire was coming down the aisle. The bride was not what Lena had pictured. She was tall and broad-shouldered with a wide, good face, and she was not wearing the kind of dress that Lena associated with weddings like this one. No train, no veil full of crystals. Just a clean ivory column of a dress, long sleeves, high neck, and she was carrying a bouquet of white flowers that she'd almost certainly arranged herself. She looked nervous. She looked happy. She looked, in Lena's guess, about 3 heartbeats away from crying. When she got to the altar, Matteo took her hand and she said something under her breath. Maybe hi, maybe okay, Lena couldn't tell. And he laughed, a short, helpless laugh, and wiped his eyes on his sleeve. She's too good for this, Dominic had said. Watching her, Lena understood for the first time why he'd said what he'd said about how it would end. The priest began. Lena let the Latin and English wash over her without listening to any of it. She was aware of her hand in Dominic's hand. She was aware of the slight chill of the pew against the back of her bare shoulders. She was aware, through some animal part of her brain she had never been able to turn off in 7 years, of every person behind her. She was also aware, 40 minutes in, that she had stopped being afraid for a little while. She noticed it because it came back. The fear. It came back all at once, the way it always did, a cold pour down the back of her neck, and she didn't know why. And then she did. Someone was watching her. Not the normal watching, not the curious watching of a wedding guest checking out the mystery woman on Dominic Varelli's arm. This was different. This was the specific, steady, patient watching of a man whose eyes didn't move. She did not turn her head. She had trained herself not to turn her head. Instead, she tipped her face slightly toward Dominic, and she let her eyes travel past his shoulder, the way you'd do if you were just adjusting how you were sitting. She scanned the pews behind them on his side. Nothing. Nothing. Old man. Old man. Woman in green. Man on a phone he wasn't supposed to be on. Nothing. Then back the other way. She tipped her head the other direction, tucked it almost against Dominic's shoulder, like a woman settling closer to her date, and let her eyes run the pews on her own side. And she saw him. 8 rows back, aisle seat, gray suit that was a little too cheap for this wedding, late 40s, maybe 50, thin face, a mustache trimmed close, hair parted and combed flat with water, the way men did it when they'd learned to do it in a place that didn't have mirrors. He was looking straight at her. When their eyes met, he did not look away. He smiled, very small, and tipped his chin half an inch in greeting. Her whole body went cold. She knew him. She knew his face. She had not seen him in 7 years, but she had seen him twice before, in the weeks after that parking lot, once in the window of a diner outside Louisville, and once on a bus platform in Memphis, and both times she had packed a bag and moved states within 48 hours. His name, or the name she'd heard him called, was Reeve. He was Victor Hale's man. She turned her face back toward the altar. very slowly. She did not let it show on her face. She had been practicing not letting things show on her face for 7 years, and she would not let it show now, not here, not with Dominic's hand in hers and 500 people in the candlelight. But her hand must have done something, tightened or gone cold or trembled, because Dominic, who noticed everything, turned his head just slightly toward her. "What?" he said under his breath. Not even a whisper, a shape of a word. She shook her head microscopically. Not now. He looked at her for a second longer, and then he turned his face back to the altar, and if you had been watching him, and several people were watching him, always, you would not have seen any change in him at all, but she could feel it, through his hand, through the press of his shoulder. Dominic Varelli had just gone from bored and tired to very, very awake. "When?" he breathed. She understood what he was asking. She squeezed his hand twice. "Wait." He waited. They sat through the rest of the ceremony like that. Matteo and Claire exchanged rings. Matteo cried openly. Claire laughed through her own tears and said her vows in a voice loud enough that the back rows could hear her say, "I do." The priest pronounced them, and people clapped, and the organ came back up, and Matteo kissed his bride like a man who was taking a vow inside a vow. Lena clapped with everyone else. Her hands did it on their own. Her face did the right things. Somewhere behind her, Reeve had not moved. She could feel him there. She could feel the exact angle of him, the way an animal feels where the predator is in the grass. Matteo and Claire walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and the guests stood, and the priest made some announcement about the reception that Lena didn't hear. Then people were milling. The pews were unloading in slow, genteel rushes from the front. Women were hugging women. Men were shaking hands. The air filled with a soft rumble of voices. Dominic stood. She stood with him. He did not let go of her hand. "Talk," he said close to her ear. "Now, fast. There's a man in the church. Gray suit, 8 rows back on our side. Aisle. Don't look." Dominic did not look. "He's been watching me. I know him." "From where?" "From before I came to your house." "How long before?" 7 years. His jaw tightened. A muscle ticked. He smiled at someone over her shoulder, a small, polite smile, and murmured, "Is he armed?" "I don't know. Probably." "Why is he here, Lena?" And there it was. The question she had been running from for 7 years. The question she had never said out loud to anybody. Not to the sheriff in Missouri, who had been kind to her. Not to the priest in Tennessee, who had given her food. Not to the woman in Texas, who had rented her a room without asking for ID. The question she had sworn she would take to her grave, because the minute she answered it, anyone near her was in danger too. She looked up at Dominic. In the candlelight, his eyes were dark and steady, and he was waiting. "Because I saw something," she said, "a long time ago. And the man who did it has been looking for me ever since." "Who?" "Victor Hale." Something passed behind Dominic's eyes. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. In the circles Dominic Varelli moved in, a name like Victor Hale was not news. "Hale," he said quietly. "You saw Victor Hale do something." "Yes. Something he'd kill you over." "He's been trying." Dominic closed his eyes for one full second. When he opened them, the tiredness was entirely gone. What was in his face now was something harder, something that had been sleeping under the tiredness the whole time. "Okay," he said, still smiling faintly at a passing cousin who waved at him. "Okay, here's what we do. We don't run. We don't make a scene. We walk out the front with the crowd. Anton will be at the carpet. You get in the car. I handle the rest." "Dominic, listen to me. He didn't walk into St. Cecilia's tonight because he was in the neighborhood, Lena. He's here because somebody told him you were going to be here. Somebody in my house, or somebody who works for somebody in my house. Do you understand what that means?" Her stomach turned over. "It means this wasn't a chance," she said. "It means this was a trap, yours and mine." He lifted her hand, the one he was holding, and pressed his mouth briefly against her knuckles, the way a man does when he is saying something tender to his date in public. It looked like a kiss. It was not a kiss. "Smile at me, Lena, please." She smiled. It felt like tearing paper, but she smiled. "Good girl. Now walk." They joined the slow flow of guests down the aisle. Dominic shook 2 hands. He nodded at a senator. He kissed an elderly aunt on the cheek. He did all of this without ever once letting go of Lena's fingers, and without ever once looking to their left, where Reeve was standing now, also moving toward the doors, easy and unhurried, a man in no particular rush. At the back of the church, Dominic turned her slightly, as if to let her go first through the doors. And in that turn, for a half second, his eyes crossed Reeve's. It was the smallest thing, a pass of a glance, the way any two men in a crowded church might accidentally look at each other. But Lena saw Reeve's small smile widen, just a fraction, and she saw Dominic's face not change at all, and she understood that a conversation had just taken place without a single word, and that both men knew exactly who the other was. Then they were through the doors, and the cameras were on them again, and the noise, and Anton was already at the curb with the back door of the car open, and Dominic was moving her, smooth and fast, down the 15 feet of red carpet, and someone was shouting her fake name, Miss Hart, over here. And she did not turn her head, and the door of the car closed behind her like a vault. Dominic slid in beside her. Before the door was fully shut, he was already talking to Anton, low and clipped. Change of plan. We're not going to the reception. Take Prescott south to the expressway. Don't use the estate route. Use the back way through Ridgemont. Boss? Anton's eyes in the rear view. Somebody in the house sold her out. I want to know who before we walk back through that gate. Anton didn't ask a second question. He pulled them away from the curb, past the news vans, past the rope, and into the dark of Prescott Street. Lena was shaking. She hadn't realized until the car started moving. Her hands in her lap, the red nails, the borrowed bracelet, all of it was trembling like she was cold. And she wasn't cold. She was hot. Her face was hot. There was a high ringing in her ears. Breathe, Dominic said. I brought this to your house, she whispered. Dominic, I brought this to your family's wedding. I brought him to your brother. Stop. I should have run when Mrs. Castellano told me to run. I should have... Lena, stop. He turned in the seat and took her face between his hands. Not hard, just firm. His palms were warm against her jaw, and she realized with a small shock that his hands weren't shaking at all. Look at me, he said. She looked at him. You did not bring this to my house, he said. Whoever let him through those doors tonight, it wasn't you. You didn't know he'd be here. I could see it on your face. This is not your fault. Are you listening to me? Dominic, are you listening to me? Yes. Good. Now tell me everything. From the beginning, your real name, what you saw, what night, where, every detail you remember. Don't edit, don't soften. I need to know what I'm walking into because I promise you, Lena, I am walking into it. The car was moving fast now, Anton taking them south through streets that thinned as the money dropped away, toward the old industrial roads that skirted the river. Through the window, the city smeared past, bright and cold. Lena closed her eyes. She felt his hands on her face and the steadiness of them, and she thought about how she had promised herself for 7 years that she would never tell anyone, ever, because telling was dying. Telling was the thing she didn't do. My name is Kate, she said, Kate Donnelly. I'm from a town called Belfort, about 140 miles west of here. Dominic let go of her face. He sat back slowly, and he listened, and she began to talk. She started in the wrong place because there was no right place. I was 21, she said. I was waiting tables at a place called Marlowe's, off the highway. It wasn't a nice place. It was the kind of diner truckers stopped at, where the coffee was always too strong and the pies were too sweet, and the owner paid you in cash because he didn't want to deal with the paperwork. I liked it. I was saving up. I was going to go back to school in the spring. Dominic said nothing. He was watching her, but he wasn't pushing. The car rolled south through streets that had gotten narrower and darker, past shuttered bodegas and auto body shops with chain link around their lots. Anton's eyes flicked to the rear view every few seconds, checking. I worked a double that night, Lena said. A Thursday. I got off at 11. My car was parked behind the building because the lot out front was always full of semis. I was tired. I took a wrong turn out of the lot. There's this service road that cuts behind the warehouses on Route 9, and I thought I could shortcut it home. I'd done it before. Not at night, but in the daytime. I thought I knew where I was going. She stopped. Her hands twisted in her lap. She had never said any of this out loud. She had said parts of it once to a man in a sheriff's uniform who had seemed kind, And then she had watched that same man pick up a phone and call somebody who was not a cop, and she had left the station through a back door and never gone back. "Take your time," Dominic said very quietly. She took her time. She took about 10 seconds. I came around the back of a warehouse and there were 3 trucks parked in the loading bay. Big white trucks. No company names on them. I would have just driven past. I almost did. Except I saw the men. 2 of them were holding a third man up by the arms. They were dragging him. His legs weren't working right. I thought maybe he was drunk at first. I actually thought, oh, those guys are helping their buddy. Because that's what you think when you're 21 and you're from a town where nothing bad has ever happened to you. She laughed once, a small dry sound. God, I was stupid. You weren't stupid, you were young. Same thing, sometimes. She shook her head. I slowed down. I don't know why I slowed down. I should have kept driving, but I slowed down and I looked and the 2 men dropped the third one, just dropped him, like a bag of garbage. He hit the concrete and he didn't move. And then a 4th man walked out from behind one of the trucks. She wasn't looking at Dominic anymore. She was looking at the back of Anton's head, at the gray buzz of hair above his collar, because it was the only solid thing in the car that didn't have anything to do with her story. He was tall, she said, gray at the temples, wearing a coat that looked expensive. He walked over to the man on the ground, and he looked down at him for a second, and then he reached into his coat, and he took out a gun, and he shot him, once, in the head, like you'd put down a dog. Dominic exhaled, very slowly. And then he looked up, Lena said, right at me, through the windshield of my car. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. His face didn't do anything. He just looked at me like he was writing something down in his head, and then the 2 men with him started moving fast toward my car, and I threw it in reverse. How far did you get before he made you? Not far enough. She swallowed. I got back out to the main road. I drove straight through town. I didn't go to the police. I don't know why. I think I knew already. I think some part of me had seen that coat and those men and done the math. I went home. I packed a bag. I took the $300 I had in my sock drawer, and I got back in the car, and I drove until the sun came up. I called my mother from a gas station in Kentucky the next morning, and she told me she'd already had 2 men at the house looking for me. 2 men. By 7 a.m. Your mother. She wasn't well. She drank. She wasn't going to protect me from anything, Dominic. She told me on the phone to never come home. She said that. She said, Katie, don't ever come back here. Those men weren't friendly. Lena's voice cracked just a little on the word Katie. She said, go be somebody else. And then she hung up. I never called her again. Is she still alive? I don't know. Dominic nodded, like that answer made sense, like he had filed it. I was Kate Donnelly for maybe 6 weeks after that, Lena said. I bought a fake ID off a guy in Nashville. He sold me a name, Lena Hart. Real girl. She died at 19, a car accident, and her social was still clean because her family had never closed anything out. That's how it works. You buy a dead girl. I became her. I moved states every 4 or 5 months for the first 2 years, and then every 8 or 9 months after that. And for the last year, I stopped moving because I thought maybe I'd finally gotten quiet enough. And the name of the man in the coat. I didn't know his name that night. I found it later. You can find anything if you're scared enough, and you use enough library computers, and you don't log into anything as yourself. About 8 months in, I saw his face in a newspaper. There was a zoning board fight in a city I wasn't living in, and he was in the photo, and the caption said Victor Hale. I threw up in the library bathroom. He was a real estate developer. He is a real estate developer. He owns half the harbor front of 3 cities between here and the coast. The man he killed that night, I figured out later, I think, who he was. A Russian, some kind of middleman on a shipment. It wasn't about the man. It was about the shipment. It was always about the shipment. Drugs. People, I think. She said it flat. Girls. That's what I could piece together. I don't know for sure. I never knew for sure. Dominic was silent for a long moment. Through the windshield, streetlights slid past. Anton had taken them off Prescott and was working his way through a grid of empty side streets, A route Lena didn't recognize, long blocks of warehouses and chain link and the occasional lit window. Okay, Dominic said, the man in the gray suit, the one tonight. Reeve, that's what they called him. I don't know if that's a first name or a last name. I saw him twice in the first year, once through a diner window in Louisville, once on a bus platform in Memphis. Both times I left the state the same night. I never saw him again, until an hour ago. How'd he find you? I don't know, I've been running clean for a long time. I don't have a phone that's in my name, I don't use my real social. I get paid cash off the books. I don't have an email that's mine. Dominic, I don't even have a library card. I've been so careful. It wasn't you. What? I said it wasn't you. His voice had gone quiet, the way it had gone quiet in the church. You were clean. Somebody in my house wasn't. You understand the difference, Lena. Reeve didn't find you in your room tonight. Reeve found out this morning, at the earliest, that you were coming to a wedding on the arm of Dominic Varelli. That was the trigger. That's what put him in a pew in St. Cecilia's on 6 hours' notice. Somebody in my house made a phone call. Her stomach turned. To Victor Hale. To somebody who sold it to Victor Hale, maybe. Or direct. It doesn't really matter. The point is this. My mother and I have 18 people on salary inside that estate, and another 30 we rotate in and out. Any one of them could have seen you this morning getting prepped. They could have taken a picture. Somebody runs facial. And suddenly, a dead girl named Kate Donnelly is very much alive and standing in a red dress in a Varelli driveway at 6 in the evening. God. Yeah. She put her face in her hands. The bracelet caught on a piece of her hair, and she yanked her hand back and snapped a strand and didn't care. Dominic, I'm so sorry. Lena, you said tonight was supposed to be the one night you didn't have to handle anything, and Lena, stop. He reached over and took her wrist. Not hard, just a hand resting on her wrist, stilling her. If you apologize to me one more time tonight, I'm going to lose my temper, he said. And I have a rule about not losing my temper in cars, so I need you to not do that. She laughed. It came out wet and a little ragged. Okay. Good. He let go of her wrist, but she noticed he didn't pull his hand all the way back. He left it there on the seat between them, and after a second, without thinking about it, she put her hand on top of his. He didn't move. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to be honest with me because it'll matter in about 20 minutes. Okay. The thing you saw. That night in the parking lot. If Victor Hale thought that all that was left of that story was one scared 21-year-old waitress who'd never told anybody, do you think he'd still be looking for you, 7 years later, pulling strings in my house? She frowned. Yeah, because I can identify him. Identify him to who? A jury? The statute on that is long gone, Lena. Even if you went to a DA tomorrow morning, you're one witness, no body. I'm guessing there's no body, is there? There was never anything in the news. I checked. For months. Right. So you don't have a case. You never had a case. And Victor Hale is not a man who wastes resources. If he's still spending money to hunt you down 7 years later, it's not because you can put him in a courtroom. It's because there is something else you know, or something else he thinks you know, or something else about that night that still matters to him. She stared at him. I don't know what that would be. Think. She closed her eyes. There was a logo on the side of the trucks, like a stencil. It was covered up with something, tape, I think, or paint. But one of the trucks had the tape peeled back on one corner, and you could see part of a letter underneath. An M or an N. I remember because I kept turning it over in my head after trying to... A letter. Yes. Painted under a layer of something else. Yes. Dominic, it was one corner. I wasn't even sure I'd really seen it. I was so scared. He looked at her for a long moment. That's what he's been looking for. A letter on a truck? A witness to a specific truck. If those trucks belonged to somebody, a company, a shipping line, anybody who could be traced. And if you could say I saw 3 trucks in that loading bay that night and one of them had this mark on it, that's a thread somebody could pull. It's not a court case. It's something worse. It's a problem for whoever owned those trucks. Which was probably not Victor Hale personally. Probably a partner. Probably somebody bigger than Victor Hale, who would be extremely unhappy to learn that Victor had been sloppy enough to get witnessed. Lena felt her stomach drop out. So he's not trying to shut me up because of a court case. she said slowly. He's trying to shut me up before somebody else finds out I'm alive. That's what I'd guess. Jesus. Yeah. She stared at her own hand on top of his. Why does this sound like you've thought about this already? Because I have thought about it, not about you. I mean, the general shape of it. That kind of problem. I've had some version of that problem in my own life, Lena. Once or twice. He paused. 3 times. Comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Anton, up front, cleared his throat. Boss? Yeah. We got company. Dominic's whole body changed. It was subtle. Just a reorientation, a focus. But it was like watching a door quietly lock. Where? Black sedan 3 cars back picked us up on Kessler. He's been matching turns. Just one? I think there's a second one somewhere. I can't see him yet. But the first one's been steady for about 6 blocks. You got eyes on the driver? Not really. Tinted. But he's alone up front as far as I can see. Dominic leaned forward. He put one hand on the back of the driver's seat. Take the river road, not the expressway. I want to see what he does when we leave the grid. Boss? Anton turned the wheel. Lena felt the car change direction with a smooth, practiced sweep that said Anton had been a professional at this for a very long time. They came down a ramp onto a lower road that ran alongside the river. The water was a black strip to their left. To their right, old industrial lots, mostly dark. A single yellow streetlight every couple of 100 feet. Lena turned in her seat and looked out the back window. She couldn't help it. She saw headlights, low, steady, 3 cars back. Dominic, I know, don't look, face forward. She faced forward. Her heart was going so fast she could hear it in her own ears. He followed us off the ramp, Anton reported. Yeah, he followed us off the ramp. Dominic's voice was calm, almost bored. How far to the South Marina access? 4 minutes at this speed, less if you want me to move. Don't move yet. Give him rope. Anton did not move. He held the car steady at 43 miles an hour on a road rated for 45. The black sedan held its distance, neither closing nor falling back. Dominic turned back to her. Listen to me. This is going to get a little loud in a few minutes. I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Anton is going to take us somewhere safe. Not safe forever, safe for tonight. When we get there, you are going to get out of the car, and you are going to walk with me fast, and you are not going to look back. If I tell you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to run, you pick a direction, and you run. Can you do all that in a red dress? She almost laughed. I can do it barefoot. Good girl. He reached under the front passenger seat. Lena hadn't even realized there was something there, and came up with a small flat case. He opened it on his knee. Inside, nested in foam, was a pistol. Dark, compact, clean. Lena's throat closed. Dominic checked the magazine without looking at it, the way a man checked if his wallet was in his pocket. He slid it back into place, chambered around with a soft mechanical click, and set the gun on the seat between them, under the fold of his jacket where it wasn't visible. Please don't need that, she whispered. Agreed. Dominic, yeah. I'm scared. He looked at her. His eyes in the low light were steady, and something in them had gone very gentle in a way she had not seen yet. I know you are, he said. I've got you, all right? She nodded. She couldn't make her voice work. Up front, Anton said, Boss, second car, coming up on our right, parallel road. He's going to try to box us at the marina turn. How do you know? Because that's where I'd box us. Okay. Dominic's voice was still calm, but there was an edge in it now, like a blade coming out of a sheath. Change of plan. Don't take the marina. Take the pier. Pier 12. Pier 12. Service Road. The east gate's usually unlocked, but it'll be closed at this hour. Crash it if you have to. Boss. Do it. Anton did it. He took them off the river road without signaling, down a service lane Lena hadn't even seen, past a row of abandoned warehouses and a lot full of stacked shipping containers. The black sedan behind them overshot the turn, braked hard. She could see the flare of its brake lights in the side mirror, and then tried to swing back. Anton was already accelerating. He hit a dip in the road that threw them all up off the seats for a second, and then they were coming down a long, dark slope toward a pair of iron gates set between 2 concrete posts, a chain running between them, a faded sign that said Pier 12, private, no admittance. Hold on, Anton said. He hit the gates at about 35. The chains snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The gates flew outward, one of them whipping back and banging against the concrete post with a scream of metal on metal. The car fishtailed, then straightened, then rolled out onto the pier itself, a long concrete apron stretching out over the black water, lined with rusted bollards and stacked crates, and an old warehouse at the far end, boarded up, a single broken window. Anton killed the lights. He drove the last 200 feet in the dark, by memory and by the thin moonlight off the water, and stopped the car in the shadow of the warehouse where it couldn't be seen from the access road. For a second, nobody spoke. Lena could hear her own breathing and the idle hum of the engine and the slap of water against the pilings. Then she heard another engine, distant, getting closer. They saw the gate, Anton said. Yep, they'll come in careful. How careful? Careful enough that we've got about 90 seconds. Dominic reached across the seat and took Lena's hand. Out of the car, now, with me. They got out. The pier was cold. The wind off the river cut through the thin silk of her dress and went straight into her bones. Her heels, she was still in her heels, clicked once on the concrete, and she stopped and bent down and pulled them off, both of them, fast, and left them where they fell. She held the dress up to her knees and followed Dominic into the deeper dark beside the warehouse. Anton was behind them. He had a weapon in his hand now, too, something larger than what Dominic was carrying, held low against his thigh. Through here, Dominic said, low. He led her along the side of the warehouse to a steel door set into the wall. He tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back and kicked it, once, just below the lock. The door popped inward with the dry sound of cheap wood giving up. Inside, it was darker than outside. Lena could smell old oil and salt, and something dead. Anton flicked on a small flashlight, covered it with his fingers so only a slit of light came through, and moved it around the space. Empty concrete floor, steel beams overhead, a row of old lockers against one wall, a staircase at the far end going up to what must have been an office, glass windows half broken, dark. Up the stairs, Dominic said. Quiet. They went up the stairs. The steps were metal grating and Lena's bare feet hurt on them, but she didn't make a sound. At the top, Dominic opened a door into a small room with a broken window that looked out over the whole pier. There was an old desk, a chair tipped on its side, a filing cabinet with every drawer open. He crouched by the window. Anton crouched beside him. Lena dropped down behind them, her back against the wall, the cold wall through the silk of her dress, the heels of her hands pressed flat on the dirty floor. Outside, a pair of headlights crawled onto the pier. Slow, careful, just like Dominic had said. The black sedan rolled forward to the edge of what the driver could see and stopped. A second car came in behind it, smaller, a coupe, and Lena saw two men get out of the first car and one man out of the second. 3 of them. They moved like men who had done this work before. One of them was Reeve. She knew his outline even from this high up. The other 2 she didn't recognize. They stood in the open for a moment, heads together, talking. Then they split. Reeve moved toward the warehouse, toward them. The other 2 went the other way, toward the car Anton had parked, moving slow, weapons drawn and low. Dominic, Lena whispered. Shh, watch. Reeve got to the busted door of the warehouse. He paused. He looked at the wood where the lock had been. He pushed the door with the toe of his shoe. It swung inward. He did not go in. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, and then, in a voice loud enough to carry up through the broken glass into the office where they were hiding, he said, Kate, I know you're in there. Lena's whole body locked up. Kate, I don't want to hurt you. Mr. Hale doesn't want to hurt you. He just wants to talk. You've been running a long time, honey. You must be so tired. Dominic looked at her. Just looked. His face was completely still. Kate, come on out. Your friend too. Mr. Varelli, if you're hearing me, we're not here for you. We got no business with the Varellis. This is about the girl. You let the girl walk out to us, and nobody in your house has to have a bad morning tomorrow. That's a good deal, sir. That's a fair deal. Dominic did not move. He did not blink. His hand on the pistol was relaxed, almost loose, like a man holding a pen. He leaned over and put his mouth very close to Lena's ear. Stay right here, he breathed. Don't move. If you hear shooting, you get down under that desk and you wait. If we don't come back for you in 10 minutes, there's a service door behind the lockers on the ground floor that goes out to the north side. Take it. Run along the water. There's a marina half a mile up. Anton's cousin works the night gate. His name's Paul. Tell him Anton sent you. Do you have all that? Dominic, do you have all that? Yes. Good. He started to get up. She caught his wrist. Don't. Lena, I have to. Don't go down there. He looked at her. Really looked. The dim moonlight came in off the river through the broken window and put a silver edge on one side of his face. And in that light, for the first time all night, she saw him without any of the tiredness in him, without any of the armor. Just a man, looking at her. I'm not going down there to fight them, he said. I'm going down there to talk to him. I need you to let go of my wrist now. What if it's not talk? Then Anton and I do what we do, and you stay in this room. You understand? She understood. She let go of his wrist. Dominic looked at Anton. Anton nodded, once. They went down the stairs together. She could hear their feet on the metal grating, soft and fast, and then the sound of them crossing the concrete floor below, and then the creak of the door, and then Dominic's voice, clear and even, from out on the pier. Reeve, he said, I thought that was you. How you been? There was a long silence. She imagined Reeve's face doing the thing men's faces did when the man they'd come to corner turned out to be calmer than they were. Mr. Varelli? I hear you're looking for my date. Sir, this isn't Varelli business. Well, see, she's on my arm tonight, Reeve, so it kind of is. Why don't you and I talk about it like men who know each other? Just walk with me over here a little. Your friends can stay where they are. Anton's going to stay where he is too. We'll just take a little walk. She heard Reeve hesitate. Then she heard footsteps on concrete, 2 sets moving slowly away from the warehouse, out toward the end of the pier. She pressed herself lower against the wall and listened. She heard the water. She heard the distant rasp of tires on the river road somewhere beyond the gate. She heard a full minute later Dominic's voice again, too far away to make out words, but low and steady, the tone of a man laying out terms. And then she heard Reeve's voice, sharper, and a name, her real name, and then another name, lower, that she couldn't quite catch. And then she heard nothing for a long time. It was the nothing that got to her. She had gotten used in these last few minutes to hearing Dominic talk. When his voice stopped, the whole pier went underwater in her head. She pressed her cheek against the dirty wall and she counted to 10, and then to 30, and then to 60, and when she got to 100, she heard footsteps coming back. 2 sets. Not 3. She didn't know what that meant. She held still. The office door creaked. Dominic stepped through it. He was alone. He had put the pistol away somewhere under his jacket and his hands were empty. His expression, when the moonlight caught it, was not the face of a man who had just shot somebody. It was something harder to read. Closer to grief, maybe. He knelt down in front of her. It's all right, he said. They're going. Going? Going. He nodded out the window. Down on the pier, she could see the 3 of them getting back into their cars. No bodies, no sirens, just 3 men getting quietly into 2 sedans and turning them around and driving back toward the gate. What did you say to him? She whispered. I told him he could take you home to Victor Hale tonight if he wanted, or he could walk off this pier, tell Victor he hadn't found you, and stay alive for another week. That's it? No. Dominic sat back on his heels. His eyes stayed on hers. I told him I'd been quietly collecting paper on Victor Hale for about 3 years, since a man named Hale pushed into my southern shipping routes and killed a friend of mine to do it. I told Reeve that paper is in a safe in a bank he will never see, and that if anything happened to you, tonight, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, that paper would end up on the desks of 3 federal prosecutors, 2 reporters, and a very dangerous man in Chicago who has been waiting a long time for a reason to remove Victor Hale from this earth. But it is come, my man. She stared at him. You had that already. I had that already. Dominic, Lena. He reached out slowly and brushed a piece of hair back from her face. His fingers were cold. I told you in the car I was walking into this. I meant it. I've been walking toward Victor Hale for 3 years. I just didn't know, until about an hour ago, that I had a reason to start walking faster. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just sat there on the dirty office floor in a ruined red dress, with her bare feet cold against the concrete, and let a man she barely knew put her hair behind her ear with shaking hands. Below them, somewhere on the pier, an engine started up. Then another. Then, for a long stretch of minutes, nothing but the river. The silence on the pier did not feel like safety. Lena had learned, over 7 years of running, that silence was the worst sound a predator made. Noise meant a man was still deciding what to do. Silence meant he had already decided and was walking toward you. So she sat there on the filthy office floor in her red dress with her heart still hammering, and she waited for the shoe to drop. It did not drop. Not yet. Dominic got up, slowly, offered her his hand, and pulled her to her feet. Her legs almost didn't hold her. He caught her elbow, steadied her, waited. "Can you walk?" he said. "I think so." "Shoes?" She laughed, a thin, tired sound. "I left them out there somewhere." "I'll get them." "Dominic, please don't go back out there to get my shoes." "I'm getting your shoes." He went back down the stairs. She heard him cross the warehouse floor, heard the door creak. A minute later he was back, holding the red heels by their straps, like a man carrying a dead thing at arm's length. "They're ruined," she said. "Everything's ruined. Let's go." He led her down the metal staircase with one hand on her back. Anton was waiting at the bottom, weapon holstered, face professional. He did not ask what had happened out at the end of the pier. He did not need to. He had watched it from a distance, and that was his job. And the rest of it was not his business, and he did not make it his business, which, Lena thought, was probably why he had been employed by Dominic Varelli for however long he had been employed by Dominic Varelli. The car was where they'd left it in the shadow of the warehouse. The broken gate was where they'd left it too, hanging off its hinges like a jaw. They got in. Anton started the engine. He backed them down the pier, turned, and drove them slow and quiet back up the service road. Nobody spoke for 5 minutes. Lena stared at her own feet in the footwell. They were filthy, the soles black with whatever had been on that warehouse floor, and they had a small cut on the right heel that she hadn't felt until now. The red dress was wrecked. A tear along the slit, a smear of grease near the knee, a faint crescent of dirt across the back where she'd pressed herself to the wall. She pulled the hem over her knees and held it there. "Where are we going?" she said. "Not the estate," Dominic said. "Not tonight." "Then where?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I control. I own a building downtown, the top 2 floors. Nobody knows it's mine. It's held under a corporation my mother doesn't have access to. We'll go there. Anton will stay with us tonight. Tomorrow we start figuring out who in my house made that phone call. And then?" He looked at her sidelong. "And then I deal with it." She didn't ask him what deal with it meant. She thought she knew. She thought she was maybe supposed to feel something about that. Some version of horror. Some instinct that said you shouldn't be sitting in a car with a man who uses those words like that. But what she actually felt, sitting there in her torn dress with her shaking hands in her lap, was a strange, shameful relief. For 7 years she had carried this thing alone. Tonight, for the first time, somebody else was carrying part of it. And the person carrying it was not soft. The person carrying it was a man who kept a pistol under a passenger seat and spoke to gunmen on piers in a voice like winter. She should have been horrified. She was mostly just grateful. And she hated that she was grateful, because being grateful to a man like Dominic Varelli was the kind of thing that tied you to him in ways you couldn't untie later. Anton took them north, back up through the industrial zone, up onto the expressway, and then down into the city proper. The skyline came at them again through the windshield, and this time Lena did not count the floors of the tower. She watched Dominic's face in the slide of passing streetlights. He was looking out his window. He was somewhere else entirely. She could see him thinking the way some men paced, whole rooms inside his head that she couldn't see into, doors opening and closing. The building he owned turned out to be an older high-rise on the west side, a handsome stone thing from the 1920s with a narrow brass-trimmed door and a doorman who didn't look up when their car pulled into the private garage. Anton parked in a reserved slot. They took a private elevator up. Dominic had to put a key into a slot before the top 2 buttons lit, and stepped out into a hallway with dark paneling and thick carpet that ate the sound of their feet. There was only one door on that floor. Dominic put a key in it and pushed it open. Inside was not what Lena had expected. She had expected a bachelor's showpiece, a lot of glass, a lot of black furniture, art on the walls chosen by somebody else. What she walked into was a quiet, lived-in apartment. Hardwood floors, warm rugs, a row of floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the river. A couch that had clearly been sat on by the same person, in the same spot, for a lot of years. The left cushion was dented. A wall of books that were real books, not decoration. A piano in the corner with sheet music open on the stand. "This is your place," Lena said. "Yeah." "Nobody knows about it?" "My brother knows. Anton knows. A woman who comes in every 2 weeks to clean the floors knows. That's it." "Not your mother?" "No." She walked slowly into the room. Her bare feet sank into the rug. The warmth of the apartment was its own small shock after the cold of the pier. Her body started shaking in a new way, the way bodies shook when they were done being afraid and finally understood they were safe. Dominic saw it. He crossed to her and put his jacket around her shoulders without asking. She pulled it tight. "Bathroom's through there," he said, nodding down a hall. "Hot water's good. There's a robe on the back of the door. Use whatever you need." "Dominic, go take a shower, Lena. You're freezing. We'll talk after." She didn't argue. She went. The bathroom was warm and lit soft. Tile floor heated underneath. A shower big enough for 2 people, but used by 1. She unzipped the ruined dress and let it fall, stepped out of it, left it in a red pool on the floor because she couldn't bring herself to fold it. The bracelet came off, and she set it on the counter. The earrings, too. She stood under water as hot as she could bear it for a long time, her forehead against the tile, and she let herself cry the way she hadn't cried in years, quietly, all the way through, no stopping, and no apologies. When she was done, her chest felt hollowed out and clean. The robe on the back of the door was a man's robe, dark gray, too big, and smelled faintly of the same cedar after rain thing Dominic wore. She put it on. She rolled the sleeves 3 times. She washed her face in the sink with plain water, scrubbed off what was left of the makeup, and when she looked up at the mirror, she did not see a woman in a red dress. She saw someone closer to herself, a tired woman with wet hair and eyes that had been crying, and a mouth that looked like it had almost forgotten how to smile. She looked at herself a long time. "Kate," she whispered, testing it. She hadn't said her own name, her real name, out loud in almost 7 years. It felt strange in her mouth, like a word in a language she used to speak as a child. She turned off the light and went back out. Dominic was in the kitchen. He had taken off his own jacket and his tie and rolled up his sleeves to the elbow, and he was standing at the stove with a saucepan, doing something with milk. Anton had apparently taken up a post somewhere else in the apartment because she could hear the low murmur of a television from another room. A game, maybe, the volume just above a whisper. "Sit," Dominic said without turning. She sat at the kitchen island on a stool. The stone countertop was cool under her elbows. "What are you making?" "Hot chocolate." She almost laughed. "Seriously. My brother used to get nightmares when he was a kid. My mother didn't. She wasn't the type, so I'd make him this when he'd come into my room. It's the only thing I know how to cook that isn't eggs." He poured the milk into a mug, stirred in something from a tin, set the mug in front of her. The smell hit her, and her eyes filled for no reason she could explain. She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Thank you." "Drink it." She drank it. It was too sweet and a little scorched and absolutely perfect. She closed her eyes. Dominic stood on the other side of the counter and watched her drink. He didn't make it weird. He just stood there, arms folded, watching her the way you watched somebody come back from being underwater a long time. "You all right?" he said after a while. "No." "Okay. But closer. That's all I'm asking for tonight." She took another sip. She looked up at him over the rim of the mug. "What happens now, Dominic?" He exhaled. He leaned his elbows on the counter across from her so their faces were more or less level. "In the next 12 hours? A few things. Anton's been making calls since we got in the elevator. We're pulling the staff logs at the estate. Who clocked in today? Who had access to the hallways while you were being prepped? Who used a phone on the house system between noon and 5? Whoever it is, they'll pop. And then they leave the house. Quietly. They don't come back. And they understand very clearly that if they ever speak your name again to anyone, we'll have a second conversation. You're not going to hurt them." He looked at her a long moment. "I'm not going to promise you things, Lena. I'm not going to stand here in my kitchen and tell you a story you want to hear. The honest answer is, probably not. Probably they walk out of a building with their bag and a lot of fear, and they go somewhere I can always find them. But I'm not going to swear it, because I don't know yet who it is. And if it turns out to be somebody I trusted with things that matter, I might not be able to make that call gently. You understand me? Yes. Is that a problem for you? She thought about it. She thought about the phone call that had been made from inside his house today. She thought about Reeves standing in a pew in a candlelit church, watching her through the flicker of 100 flames. She thought about what would have happened if Dominic hadn't been paying attention. No, she said. It's not a problem. He nodded slowly, like he'd heard her answer and filed it. Okay. After that, it's Victor Hale. What do you do about Victor Hale? That's a longer conversation. But the short version is, Reeve is going to go back to him tonight, and he's going to tell him what I said on the pier. Victor is going to sit in a room for a long time and think about whether or not I'm bluffing. He's going to conclude I'm not bluffing because I'm not bluffing. And then he's going to make a decision. What decision? Pull back or come harder. If he pulls back, we have time. If he comes harder, we have a different kind of problem. Dominic, her hands were tight around the mug. If he comes harder, he's not going to come harder tonight. I want you to hear me on that. Tonight is over. Nobody is coming through that door tonight. This building has people in it. There are cameras on every floor. There's a man downstairs at the desk who is not, whatever he looks like, a doorman. You're safe tonight. Drink your hot chocolate and breathe. She drank her hot chocolate. She breathed. After a minute, she said, Why did you have 3 years of paper on Victor Hale? He didn't answer for a moment. He turned and rinsed the saucepan in the sink, slowly, like a man doing something with his hands so he didn't have to do something else with his face. Because he killed a man named Teodoro Russo, Dominic said. 3.5 years ago, in a loading yard outside Baltimore. Teo was a friend of mine. He'd been a friend of mine since we were kids. He ran freight for my father for 20 years, and when my father died, Teo stayed on for me because that was the kind of man he was. Victor Hale wanted Teo's trucking company. Teo wouldn't sell. One night, Teo came out of a restaurant at 11 at night, and a man put 3 rounds into him in front of his wife. They never arrested anybody. The police said it was a robbery. Teo's wallet was still in his pocket. I'm sorry. Yeah? He turned the water off. So I started quietly putting pieces together because that's the kind of thing I do. I'm good at it. Better than people realize. And what I had before tonight was enough to make Victor Hale lose some of his buildings and probably some of his freedom if the right person picked it up. What I didn't have until tonight was a witness. Me. You. Dominic, I can't testify against Victor Hale. He'd kill me before the subpoena hit my hand. I know that. I'm not asking you to testify. I'm never going to ask you to testify. You are not going to be a name in a courtroom, Lena. I promise you that. Then what good am I to you? He looked up sharply. What? I said, what good am I to you? If I can't testify, if I can't put him away, then why did you just... Lena, no, listen to me. I need to say this. You spent 3 years putting together a case on a man because he killed somebody you loved, and tonight a girl falls into your lap who might be the missing piece, and suddenly you want to walk into a war for her, and I have to ask, Dominic, I have to ask, are you helping me because of me or because of him? The kitchen went very quiet. Dominic looked at her across the counter. He looked at her for long enough that she almost took the question back. Then he said, carefully, both. She closed her eyes. But not in the order you're worried about, he said. Listen to me, please. When you told me his name in the car, I wasn't celebrating Lena. I wasn't thinking good. I've got her now. Now I can use her. I was thinking, of course, the one honest person in my life is being hunted by the worst man I know. I was thinking I should have noticed something about you sooner. I was thinking a lot of things. And yes, somewhere in all of that, a part of me was thinking, I finally have a reason to burn Victor Hale down without asking anyone's permission. I'm not going to lie to you about that. You asked for honesty. That's honesty. Okay. But I'm not keeping you around because you're useful to me, Lena. You're not useful to me. You're a complication. You're the biggest complication I've had in 5 years. I'm not helping you because you solved my Victor Hale problem. I'm helping you because... He stopped. She opened her eyes. Because what? Because I don't know, he said. Honest. Quiet. Because I looked at you on that rug last night and I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I'd walked past you for 7 months and never once asked your name. Because I watched you walk into a church tonight on my arm and everyone in that room was looking at you and I realized I was looking at you too and I didn't want them to look at you anymore because they hadn't earned it. Because you cried in a car 20 minutes ago and the only thing I wanted in the world was for you to stop crying. I don't know, Lena. I've never had to explain this before. I don't do this. Ask my mother. She laughed, weakly, into the mug. You're asking me to ask your mother. Bad example. Very bad. Point stands. She set the mug down. Her hands were trembling again, but in a different way now, a softer way, and she put them flat on the counter to stop them. Dominic, I have to tell you something. Okay? I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. She gestured. The kitchen, the apartment, him standing across from her in his rolled shirt sleeves, the whole impossible shape of the last 24 hours. I don't know how to be a person with somebody. I haven't been a person with anybody for 7 years. I don't even know if Kate Donnelly was any good at it when she was alive. I'm not a woman who knows how to let anything be easy. I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to be scared of things that aren't scary, and I'm going to flinch when you come up behind me for probably the rest of my life, and I'm going to wake up some nights and not know where I am. That's what you're signing up for, if you're signing up for anything at all. And I need you to know that before you do any more of whatever it is you're doing for me. He didn't answer right away. He came around the counter. He did it slow, so she could see him coming, and he stopped about 2 feet from her stool. He didn't touch her. He just stood there. Lena. Yeah. I've got a list of problems about twice that long. I don't sleep more than 4 hours. I don't eat lunch. I have a temper I keep on a pretty short chain, and the chain breaks sometimes, and when it breaks, people get hurt. I have a mother who would sell me to a stranger for the right piece of real estate. I have 14 businesses, 9 of which are legal. I have 2 brothers, one of whom I like, and one of whom I'd shoot if the light was right. I haven't had a woman spend a night in this apartment in 2.5 years, and the last one who did, I was relieved when she left. So when you say you don't know how to do this, that's fine. I don't know how to do this either. We're going to be 2 people who don't know how to do this, if we decide to do this. Are we deciding? I don't know. Are we? She looked up at him. She thought about 7 years of rented rooms and cheap locks, and eating dinner over a sink because she didn't want to sit at a table and have anything be routine enough to track. She thought about the girl in the mirror tonight, the one in the red dress with the certain spine. She thought about the weight of Dominic's hand in hers in the car. She didn't answer with words. She reached out, slowly, and took his hand and turned it over and put her palm against his palm and curled her fingers around his. Dominic looked down at their hands. He closed his fingers around hers. He didn't pull her closer. He didn't kiss her. He just stood there and held her hand in his kitchen at 1 a.m. After a long minute, he said quietly, Okay. Okay? Finish your hot chocolate. Okay. He went back around to his side of the counter. She finished her hot chocolate. Neither of them said anything for a while. And the silence was, for the first time all night, not the bad kind of silence. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his face changed. Not hardened, exactly. Just came back online, the way a man came back to the job. Anton found something, he said. Who? He didn't answer. He turned the phone so she could see. On the screen was a photograph, grainy, pulled from a security camera somewhere. It showed a woman in a black uniform standing at a corner of the hallway outside Lena's room at the estate at what the timestamp said was 11:14 a.m. She was holding a phone up, not to her ear, to the wall, at an angle that wasn't about making a call, taking a picture. Lena stared at the image. The woman's face was partly in profile, middle-aged, hair pinned back, a face Lena had seen maybe 1,000 times over 7 months, nodding good morning across a breakfast tray, handing her linens, asking her if she wanted tea. No, she said. Yeah. That's Sarah. Yeah. She's been there for... For years, Dominic, she showed me how to fold the towels the way Mrs. Castellano likes them. She's been there 11 years. I was the one who hired her. Her cousin was in county for a while, and she came to me to help get him out. And I did. And she's worked for me since. He stared at the photo. Lena, this is very bad. How bad? It's bad because it means Victor has had a person inside my house for at least as long as she has been a person in my house, which is 11 years, which is 4 years before he killed Teo, which means he didn't decide to put somebody inside my house because of me. He had somebody there already. He was waiting. She put her hand over her mouth. Oh, God. Yeah. Dominic, she has a key to my room. She has a key to your mother's room. I know. He didn't move for a long second. He just stood there looking at his phone with his jaw set in a way that frightened her a little. Then he put the phone face down on the counter, carefully, like he didn't trust himself to do anything else with it. Anton came into the kitchen from wherever he had been. His face was grim. He didn't need to say anything. He just stood in the doorway and waited for orders. Anton, Dominic said without looking up. Boss? Where is she right now? Home. Her mother's place on Vine. Camera on the corner put her through the front door at 11:40. Hasn't come back out. Anyone with her? Mother, teenage nephew. That's the household. Okay? Dominic's voice was very level. Nobody moves on her tonight. Nobody goes near that house. You understand? I don't want a car on her block. I don't want a man on her porch. I don't want her to know we know. Anton frowned. Boss, if she makes another call, she's not going to make another call tonight. She already made the one she gets paid to make today. She's going to sleep. And in the morning, she's going to come back to the estate to do her shift. And when she walks through the service door of the main house, I want her sitting in the breakfast room in 3 minutes, alone. Coffee. No guards in the room. You and I will be in the next room through the open door, listening. I want to talk to her like a person, Anton, before I do anything else, boss. And in the meantime, and this is the important part, tell everyone on rotation she is not to know that we know. Her shift tomorrow is a normal shift. Her morning greeting is a normal morning greeting. Nobody does anything different. Anybody makes her nervous before I've had breakfast with her, I'll put them on a fishing boat in the morning. Understood. Anton left. Dominic exhaled. He looked at Lena. I'm sorry, he said. This is not how tonight was supposed to go. I think we said goodbye to how tonight was supposed to go about 4 hours ago. Yeah. Dominic. 11 years, that's longer than I've been running. It means Victor Hale knew about your existence before you did, in a way. He's had a person inside this family since before he and I ever had a problem with each other, which means he has been playing a long game I didn't know was being played. Which means I've been underestimating him. Yes. She looked down at the counter. I brought all of this into your kitchen, she said. You didn't bring it. It was already here. You just turned the light on. Dominic. Lena, please stop apologizing for surviving. She looked up. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something fierce, a little angry, but the anger wasn't at her. The anger was at something very far away, something he was going to walk toward in the morning. Go sleep, he said, softer. Guest room is the second door on the right. There's clothes in the drawer. She saw some things my sister-in-law left the one time she stayed. They'll fit well enough. I'll be up a while. Anton's awake. The door downstairs is locked. You're as safe as you've been in 7 years. Are you coming to bed? She heard it as it came out of her mouth. She felt her face go hot. She started to say something, to take it back, to reframe it, to make it smaller. And Dominic cut her off gently. Not tonight, he said. Not like that. Not on a night like this one. But I'll be in the next room, and the door's open, and if you need anything, you say my name, and I'll hear you. Okay? Okay? She slid off the stool. She didn't let go of his hand right away. She held it for another second, his big warm hand in her small cold one. And then she let go, and she pulled the gray robe tighter around herself, and she walked down the hall to the second door on the right. The guest room was quiet and clean. There were pajamas in the drawer as promised, soft cotton ones, the tags still on. The bed was made with white sheets and a heavy gray blanket. She changed. She got under the covers. The sheets smelled like nothing, like soap, like cleanness. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. She listened for sounds in the apartment. She heard Dominic moving around in the kitchen. She heard the soft murmur of his voice, low, talking to Anton. She heard once a laugh, dry, brief. She heard water running, then silence. She heard him go into a room not far from hers. She heard the click of a lamp. She heard his breathing, after a long time, through the wall. And for the first time in 7 years, Lena Hart, whose name was Kate Donnelly, whose mother had told her to go be somebody else, who had slept with a kitchen knife under a dozen pillows in a dozen rented rooms, closed her eyes and let the sound of another person breathing in the next room lull her down into the darkest, deepest sleep she had ever known. Outside, the city kept turning. Somewhere across the river, a woman named Sarah slept in her mother's house on Vine Street, not knowing that by lunchtime tomorrow she would be sitting across from Dominic Varelli at a breakfast table with a cup of coffee she would not be allowed to finish. Somewhere, in an office in a building she had once cleaned, Victor Hale was being woken up by a phone call from a man named Reeve. Somewhere, a federal prosecutor in a house 3 states away was receiving, by courier, a sealed envelope that she would not open for another 12 hours. And somewhere in an old apartment above a dark river, 2 people who did not know how to do this were learning how to do this, badly, together, for the first time. She woke up to the smell of coffee. For a second, Lena didn't know where she was. White sheets, a gray blanket, a ceiling she didn't recognize. Then her body remembered before her mind did. The cold of the pier, the sound of Reeves' voice through a broken window, the weight of Dominic's hand in hers at a kitchen counter. She sat up slowly. Her hair was still a little damp at the ends. The borrowed pajamas were soft and too big at the shoulders. Outside, through the gauze of the curtain, the river was running flat and gray, and the sky above it was the color of an old nickel. It was 7:15. She had slept 7 straight hours. She hadn't slept 7 straight hours since she was 21 years old. She got up. She was stiff in a way that had nothing to do with the bed and everything to do with a body that had been braced to run for 7 years and was just now, for the first time, starting to set down some of the weight. She padded barefoot to the door and opened it. The apartment was quiet. The television was off. The kitchen light was on. Dominic was at the island in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled, drinking coffee from a plain white cup. He had not shaved. He looked, if anything, more tired than he had looked last night, which she would have said was impossible. He looked up when she came in and something in his face softened, just a little. "You slept," he said. "Yeah." "Good." She crossed to the counter. He slid a cup of coffee to her without asking. She took it, held it with both hands. The heat of it was a kind of kindness all by itself. "Has she started?" "Not yet. She's due at 9. Anton's at the estate. Mrs. Castellano has been told to send her to the breakfast room the minute she walks in the service door, and to act like nothing's different until then." "Mrs. Castellano knows?" "Mrs. Castellano has known for an hour. She didn't say anything, but I could hear her mouth get thinner over the phone." Lena almost laughed. She hates that she missed something for 11 years. She's going to be insufferable about it for the next month. Yes. He was trying, she realized, to make this lighter than it was. For her. She appreciated it, and she didn't want it. Not this morning. She wanted it straight. "Dominic." "Yeah." "I want to be there." He set his coffee down. "When I talk to her." "Yes?" "No." "Dominic." "No, Lena. Listen, you want to be there because you think you owe it to yourself to look her in the face. I get that. But if you're in that room, she's going to flinch. She's going to know we know. She's going to start protecting whatever she was sent to protect, and we won't get anything out of her but a performance. I need her to walk into a room and see me, alone, on the other side of a table with 2 cups of coffee, and I need her to think that what I want to talk about is last night. Not her, not you, not Victor. Last night, and was everything all right during the prep? And did she hear anything interesting, and has she noticed anyone on the grounds who didn't belong? I need her to feel helpful. I need her to feel safe. And then I start peeling." She looked at him across the counter. She understood suddenly, with a small twist in her stomach, that she was looking at the part of Dominic Varelli that had made him the most feared man in 4 states. Not the pistol. Not the threats. This. The absolute patient cruelty of a man who knew how to make you trust him for 4 hours before he destroyed you. She was going to have to make peace with that, she realized. Not today, but soon. Okay, she said. I won't be there. Thank you. But I want a phone. I want to hear it. He considered her for a second. Then he nodded. Anton can patch you in. You listen from here. You don't speak. You don't cough. You don't do anything. Yes? Yes? Good. He drank the last of his coffee in one swallow, set the cup in the sink, and came around the counter. For a second she thought he was going to touch her shoulder, her face, and he didn't, quite. He stopped about a foot away. His eyes went over her face like he was memorizing something. I'll call you when it's set up, he said. There's food in the fridge. Eat something, please. You've lost weight since last night, and I don't know how that's possible. I'll eat. Good. He paused at the door. Lena. Yeah. If this goes badly, if she tells me something I don't like, or I might not come back here for a day or two. Anton will stay. Don't leave the building. Don't answer the door for anyone who isn't me or him. There'll be food brought up. You'll be fine. Dominic. Yeah. Please come back. He looked at her. Some of the professional hardness went out of him. He nodded once. I'll come back. Then he was gone. The breakfast room at the Varelli estate was a long room with pale yellow walls and tall windows facing the east garden. At 9:02 that morning, Sarah Delgado, 51 years old, employed by the Varellis for 11 years, once promoted from floor staff to housekeeping because of her steady hands and her discretion, walked into that room carrying a silver coffee pot she had brought, as instructed, from the service hallway. She saw Dominic at the far end of the table. He was alone. There was a second cup already poured across from him. He smiled at her, a small, tired, friendly smile, and waved her to the seat opposite. Sarah, sit, please. Sir? Her eyes flicked to the doorway behind her. Nobody there. Mrs. Castellano said you wanted the morning pot. I did. Set it down. Sit. Keep me company a minute. She set down the pot. She sat. She did this without hesitation because she had been sitting down when Dominic Varelli told her to sit down for 11 years. Across the river, in an apartment above the water, Lena sat cross-legged on the couch with a phone pressed to her ear. Anton had called her at 8:50, and the line had been open ever since. She had heard Sarah's footsteps. She had heard the quiet clink of the coffee pot on the table. She heard Dominic say, "Long night for all of us? How'd your morning go getting over here?" "Oh." Sarah's voice, startled, pleased to have been asked. "Fine, sir, fine. Traffic on the bridge, but it's always traffic on the bridge." "Your mother well?" "She's well, sir. Thank you for asking." "Good, good. Listen, Sarah, I wanted to talk to you about last night." Lena's fingers tightened on the phone. "Last night, sir?" "The wedding. You worked the prep, right? On Miss Hart?" "Yes, sir. I did her room. In the morning. I tidied. I brought her the tray." "Right. I'm trying to figure out something, Sarah, and you might be able to help me. You mind?" "Of course, sir. Anything." "There was a woman in a van outside the service gate around 11:30 yesterday. Caterer, allegedly. But the name on the van didn't match the names on our list, and by the time the gate went to check, the van was gone. I've been trying to figure out if anybody saw anything odd around that time. You were in the staff corridor around then, weren't you?" A pause. Lena could almost hear Sarah's mind turning over. I was, sir. I think. I was around then. Did you see anybody on your side of the building who didn't belong? Anybody on a phone where they shouldn't have been? Anything at all?" Another pause. Longer. "No, sir, I didn't see anybody." "You sure?" "Yes, sir, I'm sure. I was mostly in Miss Hart's room, sir. I wasn't in the corridor long." "Okay." Dominic's voice stayed perfectly friendly. "That's okay. I just thought I'd ask. You have sharp eyes, Sarah. I've always thought so." "Thank you, sir. Let me ask you something else." "Yes, sir." "When you were in Miss Hart's room, did anybody else come in while you were there?" "No, sir." "Nobody at all?" "No, sir." "Okay." And then, without any change in tone at all, Dominic said, Then how come there's a picture of you on a camera in the corridor at 11:14, holding a phone up to the wall, taking a photograph of something? Sarah! The silence on the line went so cold that Lena felt it through the phone. Sir, it's a pretty clear picture. The camera's a good one. I know the exact time because my security man stamped it. You're not on a call. You're not checking a text. You're holding the phone at an angle that is only useful for photographing the floor plan of the hallway, which is, if you think about it, a funny thing to photograph, because anybody who works here already knows the floor plan. Sir, Sarah, don't. Sir, I can explain. Don't, sweetheart, please. You're making it worse. Just sit with me. Drink your coffee. We're going to talk. Lena heard a cup being picked up, very slowly, with a faintly rattling hand. For 11 years, Dominic said, conversational, I have thought of you as somebody in my house. You helped me get your cousin out of county in 2016. Do you remember that? Yes, sir. How much did I pay the lawyer, Sarah? $62,000, sir. $62,000. He said it like a man reading a receipt. And you have worked for me for 11 years at a rate that is, frankly, above what this job pays. And my mother has let you into her dressing room, and into her study, and into rooms I myself don't go into unless I'm invited. You understand that, right? You understand what it means that you have been in this house. Yes, sir. So I would like you to tell me, please, who you took that picture for. A long silence. Sarah, I can't, sir. You can. Sir, they'll what, Sarah, kill you? A small, strangled sound. Because let me tell you what's going to happen if you don't tell me. You're going to leave this room, and you're going to walk out of this house, and you're going to go back to your mother's house on Vine Street. And within 72 hours, whoever paid you is going to come to that house. Because now that I know about you, you're a risk to them. And they are going to kill you and your mother and your nephew, because that's what careful men do with assets that have stopped being useful. I know this, Sarah, because I am one of those careful men, and I have done it. So the question isn't whether you're going to die if you don't talk. The question is just who is going to kill you, me or them. Sir, oh God, sir, or, and now his voice for the first time softened, or, you tell me, right now, sitting here, drinking this coffee, who paid you, and when, and what you told them. And then you get up from this table, and you pack one bag, and Anton drives you and your mother and your nephew out of this state by noon to a house I own in another state that nobody knows about. And you stay there quietly until I tell you it's safe to come out, which may be a year, which may be 5. I don't know yet, but it will be alive, Sarah. That's the offer. That's the only offer. I'm going to count to 20 slowly, and at 20, if you haven't started talking, I'm going to take that offer off the table. Lena held her breath. Dominic started counting. Quietly. Evenly. 1, 2, 3. At 11, Sarah Delgado broke. She broke the way people break when a man offers them a door out of a fire. She started talking so fast she had to stop and start 3 times just to get a clean sentence out. Lena listened. She heard a name she had never heard before. A man named Doyle, who had approached Sarah in 2014 outside a pharmacy, who had offered her $200 a week for information, nothing you wouldn't tell a friend, just what's going on in the house. She heard how Doyle had been replaced 4 years later by another man, not Reeve, somebody named Carter. She heard how Sarah had taken a picture of Lena Hart at 11:14 yesterday morning because Carter had called her at 10:40 and said, if the boss has a new girl up there, I need a shot of her face within an hour. I didn't know who she was, sir, I swear. I didn't know she was anyone. Okay. I didn't know what they would do with it. I didn't... Sarah, stop. I believe you. Sir, finish your coffee. Anton is going to come into the room in about 30 seconds. He's going to tell you to go to your car. You go to your car. You drive home. You pack 1 bag each for you, your mother, and your nephew. Essentials only. No photos, no keepsakes. You'll get them later. By 11:30, Anton will be at your door. Do exactly what he says. Don't call your cousin. Don't call anybody. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Sarah. Yes, sir. I'm going to ask you something. Answer honest. Yes, sir. Did you know who Miss Hart really was? No, sir. No, sir, I swear. Carter just said she was somebody from Mr. Hale's past. That's all he said. I didn't know anything more than that, sir. I didn't know she had a name. I didn't know. I would have, sir. I have a nephew, sir. I wouldn't have. Okay, Sarah, that's enough. Go with Anton. Lena heard the chair scrape. She heard the door open. She heard a low exchange between Anton and Sarah, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the door closing again, and then a long silence on the line, and after what felt like a very long time, Dominic's voice, quiet, directly into the phone. Lena, I'm here. You okay? Yeah. Good. Dominic. Yeah. Who's Carter? Carter is a man who's been doing this kind of work for Victor Hale for about 15 years. He's a middleman. I know where he lives. Anton's going to go have a conversation with him this afternoon. And after that conversation, we're going to know a lot of things we don't know right now, including how many other Sarahs are in my world that I haven't found yet. Okay. I need to stay out here today. I might need to stay out here tonight. I know. Lena, I know, Dominic. Go. He went. The rest of that day, in the apartment above the river, Lena did very quiet things. She made toast. She ate it slowly at the kitchen island. She stood at the window for a long time and watched a barge move up the river, long and patient, a little orange dot of a tugboat shoving it. She walked from room to room and let her fingers touch the spines of the books on the wall. Old editions, a lot of them, some in other languages. She sat on the piano bench for a while without playing anything. She cried twice. Briefly, for no reason she could name. At 2 in the afternoon, Anton called to tell her that Sarah and her mother and her nephew were on a plane. At 5, he called to tell her that Carter had been visited and was no longer available for further assignments. He did not explain what that meant, and Lena did not ask. At 7, Dominic came home. He came in quietly. She was on the couch, in the same pajamas, reading one of his books, an old collection of poems, nothing she'd recognized, just the first thing she'd pulled off the shelf. When she heard the door, she stood up. He crossed the room to her, and she met him halfway, and he put his arms around her, and she leaned into his chest, and neither of them said anything for a long time. He smelled like cold air and coffee, and something underneath both. It's done, he said finally, into her hair. The part I can do today. Victor? Victor called me an hour ago. She stiffened against him. Victor Hale called you. What did he say? Dominic pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were tired, but there was something almost amused in them now, a dry, weary humor. He said, Dominic, we had a long thing going, and I liked it, and I'm sorry it's broken. I'm getting old. I have grandchildren. The girl is yours. I don't know her. I have never known her. If we ever cross paths in a hallway, I will nod, and I will not remember her face. You have my word. You believe him? I believe he means it today. I believe he will mean it for about 3 years. And I believe that in 3 years, when he is a little more desperate or a little more drunk or a little more sick, he may stop meaning it. And I will be watching that whole time. And so will the very dangerous man in Chicago who received a very interesting envelope from me by courier this morning. What was in the envelope? A copy of what I have. Sealed. With a note that said, this opens if anything happens to a woman named Lena Hart, address attached, or to Dominic Varelli. He paused. The man in Chicago owed me something old. He owes me less now. It was a fair trade. Dominic, you gave a very dangerous man a file on Victor Hale. I gave a very dangerous man leverage over Victor Hale that does not trigger unless Victor Hale touches you. So as of about 4 o'clock this afternoon, Lena, Victor Hale has one of the city's most patient killers personally invested in keeping you alive, which is, possibly, the strangest sentence I have ever said to a woman in my kitchen. She laughed. She actually laughed. It came out wet and a little hysterical, and then it came out as a real laugh, and Dominic's face broke into something like a smile, and he pulled her back against his chest, and they stood there in the middle of his living room while the river went dark outside the windows and the lights of the city came up one by one on the far bank. It's over? She said, against his shirt. The running part. The other parts? The other parts are just life, Lena. Everybody has those. She thought about that. I don't know what my life is, she said. I don't know who I am, if I'm not running. No, he said. You don't, but you're going to find out. And I'd like to be around while you do if that's still on the table. It's on the table. Okay. Dominic. Yeah. What do I do with Kate Donnelly? He was quiet for a moment, his chin resting lightly on the top of her head. I don't think you have to decide today, he said. You can be Lena to the world and Kate to me. You can be Kate to the world and Lena to no one. You can be both. You can be neither. You can pick whatever fits tomorrow and pick something else the day after. That's the thing nobody told you for 7 years, sweetheart. You're allowed to change your mind. You just had to stay alive long enough to do it. She cried quietly, then, for a third time that day. And this one was not out of fear or grief, but out of some other thing, some relief so deep it didn't have a name. He held her until it ran its course. He was not good at it. He was stiff in the arms, and he kept not knowing where to put his hands. And at one point his phone buzzed in his pocket, and he ignored it, and it buzzed again. And he made a small annoyed sound against her hair. And it was the least graceful, least cinematic, least beautiful comfort she had ever been given. And she loved him, fiercely, for every clumsy second of it. The weeks that followed were not clean. Nothing in real life ever is. The story could have ended, in a neater telling, with the two of them on a terrace at sunset, some orchestral swell, a kiss, a slow fade. It didn't. Real life doesn't fade. Real life is the morning after, and the morning after that. The morning after that morning, Dominic's mother came to the estate in a car driven by her own driver, and she walked into her son's study without knocking, and she said 4 things to him in a voice like something scraped off the bottom of a pot. He let her say all 4. When she was done, he said, "Mother, I love you, and Lena is staying," and he did not raise his voice, and his mother, who had never been told no by her son in 39 years, sat down in a chair and did not get back up for a long time. She and Lena did not become friends. They never became friends. Mrs. Varelli lived for another 11 years, and she called Lena by her first name exactly twice in all that time, both times at Christmas, both times under duress. But she stopped trying to push her out. That was all Dominic had asked of her. That was the deal. That was enough. Mrs. Castellano, on the other hand, iron-haired, narrow-mouthed, terrifying Mrs. Castellano, softened by about 4%, which in her was a revolution. 6 months in, she stopped calling Lena Miss Hart and started calling her Miss Lena, which Dominic told her privately was a higher honor than being knighted. A year in, she taught Lena how to fold a napkin into a bird. 2 years in, when Lena had a very bad night and woke up crying at 3 in the morning and came downstairs for tea, she found Mrs. Castellano already in the kitchen, already with the kettle on, already pushing a cup across the counter without a word, as if she had heard the younger woman's breath change through the walls of the house. Matteo and Claire, the impossible couple that Dominic had predicted would break in 3 years, did break, but not in the way he'd thought. They broke twice and came back and broke once more and came back again, and by the 4th year they were the happiest either of them had been, and they had a little girl they named after no one in either family, which Dominic said was the single bravest act he had ever seen either of them commit. Victor Hale kept his word for 4 years, not 3. When he broke it, and he did break it, in a way that was less dramatic than Lena had feared and more bureaucratic, a man in a suit asking too many questions about her social security number at a bank branch. A courier arrived at 3 separate offices in 3 separate cities within 24 hours. 2 weeks later, Victor Hale was arrested in the parking lot of his own country club on charges that filled 41 pages. He died in a federal medical facility 9 months into the trial, of a heart attack his doctors had been warning him about for a decade. Lena did not go to any of it. She did not need to. The first time she heard his name on a television in her own living room, she watched the anchor say it, and she waited to feel afraid. And she found, to her own surprise, that she did not. She got up. She turned the television off. She went to find Dominic in his study. She sat in his lap while he pretended to still be reading the paper. After a while, she said, "He's going to die in prison." And Dominic said, "Yes." And she said, "I thought I would feel something bigger than this." And he said, "You will, later, at odd times, for years. That's how this works." And he was right. Reeve disappeared. Nobody ever figured out where. Anton stayed. He drove Lena everywhere for a long time. The market, the dentist, the quiet little walks she liked to take along the river. He never made a show of it, and he never let anybody notice him. After about a year, she asked him once, in the car, if he didn't find this boring. He thought about it for a long moment. Then he said, Miss Lena, I was a boy in a town where there were 3 kinds of men, and I did not want to be the first 2 kinds. And it turned out I was not very good at being the 3rd kind either. This is better. She never asked him again. And Kate Donnelly, the name, the girl, the frightened 21-year-old in a cheap waitress uniform who had taken a wrong turn behind a warehouse. Lena made peace with her slowly. She did not go back to Belfort. Her mother had died 2 years earlier, she learned. She'd been buried under a name Lena had not shared. She sent money, anonymously, to a cousin she barely remembered. She lit a candle, once, in a church she did not otherwise set foot in, and she said, I'm sorry I had to leave you there alone, Mom, out loud, to nobody. And then she walked out, and she did not go back. She did go back, though, to one thing. On the 5th anniversary of the night she met him in the corridor with a wet rag in her hand, Dominic asked her to marry him. He did it badly. He did it in the kitchen, at the same island, without a ring, because he had forgotten the ring at the jeweler's that afternoon. He said, Lena, I know this is stupid, I had a whole plan, and she was laughing too hard by the second sentence for him to finish. She said yes before he was done. They were married 6 weeks later in the garden of the estate, with 30 people, no press, no senators, no magazines, and Mateo walked her down a path of white stones because her own father had been gone too long for anybody to find. She wore a dress that was not red, but she kept the red one, wrecked and grease-stained and impossible to wear again, folded in tissue paper in the top of a closet, because she needed sometimes to remember the shape of the woman she had been when she first stopped being invisible. That was the thing, she thought, that she would have wanted somebody to tell her on the worst night of her life in a cheap blue Corolla on a highway in Kentucky at 4 a.m. with her mother's voice still in her ears. Being invisible was not the same as being safe. Being small was not the same as being alive. There was no version of this life where you hid long enough to be forgiven for having been seen once. You did not earn your peace by disappearing. You earned it, if you earned it at all, by being seen by the right person. One person, sometimes, was enough. And by letting them see you, even when every cell in your body screamed that being seen was dying. She had walked into a church on Dominic Varelli's arm believing that being looked at was the thing that would kill her. It wasn't. It was the thing that saved her. Because when Reeve turned his head in that pew and saw her, Dominic turned his head and saw her too. And Dominic, for all his ruin and all his sins and all the things about him she still, some mornings, did not know how to make peace with, Dominic saw her harder than Reeve did. That was the whole difference. That was everything. On a Tuesday evening in late September, 9 years after the night a crime boss pointed at a maid and said, she's coming with me, Lena Varelli stood at the railing of a terrace above a river with a glass of something cold in her hand, watching her husband pace slowly up and down the length of the terrace behind her with their 7-month-old son asleep against his shoulder. The baby was a solid, sweaty weight, and Dominic was patting him on the back with a rhythm he had developed on night 3 and never deviated from since. He was humming, badly, tunelessly, a song Lena did not recognize and was not sure existed. She turned from the rail and looked at him. He caught her looking. He raised an eyebrow. What? He whispered, so as not to wake the baby. Nothing. Tell me. Just... She shook her head. Her eyes were a little bright. Just that we did it. We're here, all of us. We did it. He looked at her for a long moment. He shifted the baby. He came closer. Yeah, he said. We did. Are you happy, Dominic? I don't know what that word means, sweetheart. I never have. Okay. But I'm home. I know what that word means. She set her glass on the little iron table by the rail. She went to him. She put one hand on the baby's warm back and the other on her husband's arm, and she stood there with them in the September dusk, while below the terrace the river kept running toward the sea, patient and slow and old, and the lights of the city came up one by one like something answering. Not everybody gets to stop running. Some do,